This episode of the Kernow Cast is sponsored by Kernow Valeting and Detailing. They offer various amounts of different valeting options. So they offer Drexler ceramic coating, body and alloys. He's a certified detailer. Starts from £280. Other options are clay bar treatments, ultimate clean and protection £500. A gold valley is £60. A silver valley is £40 and a bronze valley is £20. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram, Kernow Valeting and Detailing. And if you quote KernowCast when you contact them, you will get £10 off your next clay bar treatment, which the regular retail price is £50. So, yeah, Kernow Valeting and Detailing, sponsors of the Kernow Cast. Welcome to the Kernow Cast. I'm Lewis Pauling, and in this episode I interview or have a discussion with Graham Smith, who's from Cornwall Reports. He has 40 years of experience in journalism, and if you like what you hear and you think that you want to get involved with what he's doing at Cornwall Reports, then it's £30 per year to sign up, and probably for the best, journalism in Cornwall, I reckon. Also, as you may know from the last episode, we are currently experimenting with having local bands and artists preview their music on the Kernow Cast. So you'll get a short introduction. Our introductory music is going to be this week by Richard Flant, which is Richard, and his surname is spelled Flahant, and the name of the track is Raise Your Head. So if you enjoy that, search him out. You can find him on SoundCloud and YouTube, so I'll link those in the description below. Also, if you like what we're doing here at the Kernow Cast, then if you could please subscribe to us on iTunes and YouTube, and also if you could leave a review on iTunes, then that would be amazing. If you are interested in advertising on the Kernow Cast, then in the outro there'll be a little bit of a description, and I'll give you a bit more detail on how you can advertise on the podcast. As for now, I hope you enjoy my discussion with Graham Smith from Cornwall Reports.
Raise your head. Raise your head. Taiji in the dying sun, death or the aquarium. Bluefin on the menu when there's nothing in the sea. Buy a baby in a bag, a turtle for your curing tank. Navy plays with sonar and the ocean starts to bleed. Arrogance and by your side, sterilize the countryside, finding out solutions in the barrel of a gun. Take a life, evade the jail, just another lonely tale. Birds and nymphs, fun and games, flush them out and shoot them down. They can't speak. Lift your eyes from your feet, raise your head and see that they deserve our awareness. Hey, yeah, come on and raise your head now. Hey, yeah, come on, raise your head now.
Just a quick note, I forgot to put it in the introduction, but this was recorded at the Royal Inn in Parr, bang opposite the train station. So thank you to all at the Royal Inn for letting us record and film there. So yeah, if you like the background sounds, which hopefully don't get in the way of the conversation, then go and check out the Royal Inn in Parr. Bloody handsome pint of doom I had in there. Alright, so yeah, the Royal Inn in Parr. Welcome to the Kernow Cast. I'm Lewis Pauling, and today with me I have Graham Smith of the Cornwall Reports.
Cornwall Reports.
That's right, brilliant. And so thank you very much for being on, and it's great to see you. We are actually at the Royal Inn in Parr, so if there's a bit of extra background noise, then that's what it is. So, Graham, first of all, thanks a lot for being on. Can you just give us a brief description of what Cornwall Reports is and what you do?
Cornwall Reports is a local news website, covers the whole of Cornwall and specialises in bringing the kind of news that you won't get in mainstream media. I am a professional journalist. I've been a journalist for more than 40 years, and I'm really at I suppose you would say, the fag end of my career. I'm in my 60s now. I've worked all over the place, met some important people, learnt an awful lot on the way, been sacked by everybody, and so I needed a business model where I couldn't get sacked anymore. And modern technology allows me to do that. I no longer have to work for an editor. I no longer have to go to a newspaper or a radio station or a TV studio. I don't have to wait for sub-editors to weave their magic and to print something on big clanky old presses, or for delivery men to deliver the product to retail outlets. Yeah. I can now go straight to my customers, and the only thing that I'm worried about is, are there enough of them who are prepared to pay me directly to read what I write?
Yeah.
Been going for a year. It's going in the right direction. Got about 300 paid subscribers at the moment. It's £30 a year for a subscription. Works out at just less than 9p a day to read my stuff. I think that is fantastically good value, and I strongly encourage all your listeners to take out a subscription right now.
Yeah, definitely. I think actually £30 a year is nothing really. I mean, not if you. It depends what you want, doesn't it? I mean, if everyone just wants the news that they can get, I mean, the thing I'm gonna compare this to, what you're doing too, is probably Cornwall Live.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, you must be writing articles and stuff through as well. What sort of products and stuff do you?
I write news, hard news. I used to work for Cornwall Live. I mean, it used to be known as the Cornish Guardian or the West Briton newspaper, or
they're all sort of together, aren't they?
All owned by Trinity Mirror newspapers, and the Cornwall Live product within the Trinity Mirror stable is exactly the same as you would get in Devon or Somerset or pretty much anywhere else where Trinity Mirror operates. And they are, I think they are now the biggest local news provider in the UK. But their business model is based on the diametric opposite of my business model. They need advertising, they need eyeballs on their website in huge quantities.
Yeah.
And they are reliant on 80% of their traffic for referrals from Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
That makes them wholly dependent on Facebook's latest algorithm.
Yeah.
And so if Facebook decides to change things around, as it does from time to time, whether it's cracking down on so-called fake news, or just deciding that, what people on Facebook really want to see are cats at pianos, that really damages their revenue.
Yeah.
Because they need to convince the advertisers that they are getting tens of thousands of eyeballs on that advert every day. So it's on volume, and that drive for volume, I'm afraid to say, with Trinity Mirror has been very much at the expense of quality.
Well,
my product has tiny numbers. Trinity Mirror would just fall on the floor laughing when I said I got 300 paid subscribers after a year's trading. They would think, well, that's ridiculous.
What's the point?
You can't have a business model like that. Well, actually, you can. Just do the maths. I should be earning quite a nice salary after about 3 years of trading. And because I am old and my children are grown up and left home and so on, it's not as critical for me as it might have been, say, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But I firmly believe that the way that technology has transformed the media landscape, this is the way forward for local news. It's not sustainable to have to rely on those industrial quantities of adverts that invade your computer or crash your phone every time you go to a mainstream media site. No adverts on my site, straightforward news, and it's the kind of news that you won't get anywhere else. And the reason I can say that is because I've been doing this job for a very, very long time. I've got the contacts and the experience to dig up the sorts of stories that you won't get elsewhere. And I'm not in the pocket of any paid advertiser.
No, that's right. I mean, I was just going to sort of say that it is so frustrating when you see a clickbait title that says, it says whatever it says. It's just, you read it and think, oh wow! You click on it, and then you've got to get through 10 adverts just to get to the that actually is a pointless article at the end of the day.
Yes.
And I think that's probably where what you're doing is actually providing good quality stories and almost like the real news.
I think it's news that that people need to know. So it's not so much. If you want to see a photograph of happy, smiling children doing the latest Christmas production at a primary school, that's not what I'm able to do. I just don't have the resources to go around every primary school and do their Christingle nativity play every Christmas.
Yeah.
That used to be the lifeblood of local newspapers. It used to be mums and grannies and aunts and so on would go and buy the paper because their child's there, and that's what it's all about, is a real sense of community. We haven't got that in our local media anymore. The Cornish Guardian newspaper, for example, used to do, until quite recently, 7 different editions. There was St. Austell edition, Foy Lostwithiel edition, Padstow Wadebridge, Camford, Launceston, Bodmin, for example. Similar story with the West Briton and the Cornishman newspapers. Now it's pretty much one product for the whole of Cornwall, not really local.
Yeah.
And that's because they've had to lay off lots and lots of journalists. So it's, what I offer is, and when I say it's the kind of news I think that people need to know, it's very much an emphasis on public policy areas. So it's what's going on in the health service, it's what's going on with the council, things that you pay taxes for, and things that you ought to have some influence over because of who you vote for. That's the stuff that I focus on. Years ago, I used to work for ITV West Country, and I was the head of current affairs there, and before that, the political editor. I've been working as a journalist in Cornwall since 1980, so that's 38 years now. And I think, I would say this, wouldn't I? But I really do think that I have an unrivaled range of contacts, especially in that sphere of politics, current affairs, business community, and being able to find out what's really going on in that relationship between democratically elected organisations, say like councils or MPs at Westminster, and the people who provide you with services.
Yeah, definitely.
If you need to know, come to Cornwall Reports.
Yeah, right. But I mean, 40 years of experience. I mean, you're going to have lots of contacts, and you must be.
I'm really old.
I don't want to. Not saying that at all. But it's just experience at the end of the day. And if you've been in and around that sort of environment for that amount of time, just through the people that you know, you can find.
Well, I am really old, and being really old I don't recommend it. Being old, I think somebody said, is not for sissies, but I'm not so old that I can't get my head around the technology. I mean, when I started on the Cambridge Evening News in 1976, that was my first job as a reporter, and in those days it was printed on hot metal presses.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so the deadline for getting any story out the door and on the street was several hours in advance, because it had to be typed out on a heavy old lino type machine by men, because only men could hit the keys hard enough to punch it out into the metal, and then set out in a tray, and stone subs and so on and so forth. Fantastic environment, very heavily male dominated in those days. I mean, the media landscape now has changed, and it's probably predominantly young women who work in the media now, but when I started, it was middle-aged men, alcoholics, many of them, seriously, and the old cliche of men in grubby raincoats with pork pie hats. That's because it's rooted in truth. Absolutely, yes, and until probably the end of the 70s. So the technology has changed enormously, and I worked in radio in the days when interviews were recorded on quarter-inch tape, and you would edit it with a Chinograph pencil and a razor blade and some sellotape. And television, when I started working in television, it was recorded on film with the soundtrack on a separate piece of tape, and it had to be matched together. And if there was a story in North Devon, and the TV studios in those days, the old TSW studios, I've worked with Gus Honeybun, but that's another story. The TV studios were in Plymouth, and it was a day and a half before the story could get from North Devon back to the studios. The film had to be bathed, dried, and only then could it be edited. So now here we are in a pub with, I'm not sure how much you paid for your kit. It's a very nice kit, but anybody could do it, couldn't they?
That's right.
You don't need a TV studio to do what you're doing. You don't need a broadcasting empire
No.
to do what you're doing. And I really believe that is the way that the media is going. Everybody can be a media professional. You just got to be good enough.
That's right. I mean, for me, I'm just like starting out, so I'm just sort of getting myself, dipping my toes into this. And like you said, anyone can actually pick up this stuff and do this. Anyone can write themselves a blog and get involved in finding their own stories that they want to actually report on. And all that sort of stuff. I mean, talking about...
Well, the difficulty is getting paid, isn't it?
Of
I mean,
course.
that's really what separates the keyboard warriors who just fill social media the whole time with their latest rants on Facebook or Twitter. They're not getting paid for doing that. By and large, they're not anyway. I suppose if they're being paid by the Russians or the Chinese, they might be. But by and large, most people who use social media are not getting paid to use it. So how do you make a living out of the technology that theoretically makes it possible? Now, you either do go big for the advertising market, and I think that means you need an army of salesmen to go out there and knock on businesses' doors to get them to come to you. Or you have a product that people are willing to pay for, and it's that subscription model, the Netflix model, if you like, which is basically what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do Netflix for local news. So far, so good. But that's not to say that things couldn't possibly change. Now, my readers don't want adverts around their news stories. That's pretty clear, and that's one of the reasons. It's one of my USPs. It distinguishes me from the other competitors in the marketplace. My site won't crash your phone with pop-up adverts or Google surveys, but I do have parts of the Cornwall Report site where, to be honest, some appropriate advertising wouldn't be too offensive. News, definitely not. No way would I ever have adverts on the news pages. But I've got sports pages, I've got what's on section, and I don't think that it would be that unusual to see local bands being promoted on my what's on section, even what's on at the Hall for Cornwall, amateur dramatics groups, things like that. I'm quite open-minded about that. Events, Padstow Food Fair kind of thing, Royal Cornwall Show. That's all okay, and I think people kind of expect that. Similarly with sport, I mean, it depends on how it's done. I certainly wouldn't ever want pop-up adverts flying out of the screen in all directions, because I mean, seriously, the memory implications for people who are watching it on their mobile phone are quite severe. It will crash your phone if there's too much of that stuff. But again, if a football club, one of our local football clubs, or some other rugby club wanted to advertise something there, I'd probably say it's not a problem, and very cheap. Very cheap.
If it's something related to the part of the website that it's going to go on, like it wouldn't make sense, like you said, if it's a news article, it would make no sense. Come to this event on the weekend, like that. It doesn't jive, does it? And I think actually, I've just talking from myself and probably other people in a similar position, comparing it to Cornwall Live again, and this is where, like you said, this is your USP. I've actually stopped looking at Cornwall Live posts. I don't click on them anymore because I just know I can't be bothered.
I was going to say, why would you?
Yeah, it's a waste. It's just like I used to start getting catch, and I was like, I know what's going on here. After a few goes, you're sort of like, I know what's going on here. Whether I'm interested enough in news or not to pay for it, maybe not.
No,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's
the vast
matter.
majority of people are probably not interested enough. Like I say, my ultimate business model really only requires me to get 1,000 unique readers in Cornwall, full stop.
Yeah.
Okay? Not every day, in a year.
Yeah.
Right?
You just need 1,000 subscribers.
Now, the population of Cornwall is 570,000, something like that. Okay, now they're not all adults, they can't all read, but the kind of, most of them can read, and more than half of them are adults. So let's say about 300,000 potential readers. But not everybody's interested in news, and they're certainly not interested in the heavyweight news like The Guardian, The Independent, The Times, The Financial Times, which is the market that I'm going for. But let's relate it back to politics. That's the area that I'm most comfortable. How many people would drag themselves to a local polling station on a wet Thursday night to vote in a parish council by-election? So the most boring layer of local government you could possibly think of. And the answer is about 50,000.
Right.
Okay? So if people are already that engaged at that level, I only need 1 out of 50 of that very small sector anyway to think, do you know what, for 9 pence a day I reckon I'll give this guy a punt. He's talking about the kind of stuff I'm really interested in.
That's right.
And so why would they not? And like it's all moving in the right direction. When I was thinking of setting it up, I did do a proper business plan, I did do the market research, and I looked at the numbers, because the question I think everybody's got to ask themselves is, why hasn't this been done before? If it's that easy to set yourself up as a publisher or a broadcaster or a podcaster, why isn't somebody else already doing it and making all the money that you now hope to make?
Yeah. Well,
you need to know the answer to that, otherwise don't do it.
Totally. Or you're just being... I think a lot of it comes down to sort of confidence and like believing in yourself at the end of the day and your skill set. I mean, we've already discussed before we went on air, but I'm not experienced in this. I'm literally picking it up and going with it and going with it because
take
I'm
my hat
curious.
off to you, and I admire your enthusiasm, and
that's it. But as we're on this sort of topic, sort of take us back sort of 12 months then to just before you launched it, and sort of what was it that spurred you to do it, and what sort of surroundings?
I think it was really the fact that Trinity Mirror had taken over the Cornish Guardian newspaper, which is where I was working at the time.
Okay,
I've worked in some quite high-powered places over the last 40 years, and one by one they kind of went bust, or they got taken over by other companies, and interest in local news, in particular interest in making local current affairs documentaries, vanished. And so the penny dropped, I suppose, about 10 years ago, that my career, I was in my late 40s, actually this is the top, and unless I leave Cornwall, it's all downhill from now on.
Yeah, okay.
So I've known that for a while, and when I eventually washed ashore the gently sloping beaches of the Cornish Guardian, I thought, this is probably this is it, this is going to be my last job. I'll just stay here and try not to get sacked and wait till I retire. And then they got taken over, and all of a sudden we're not interested in local news anymore. We want you to write 10 strange things that your pet might die of, or you'll never get what these people were quite attractive when they were 21, but now they're in their 70s, guess what they look like?
Right.
And stuff like that. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not what I do. So I was profoundly unhappy. And I belong to that generation that doesn't disguise its unhappiness. Grumpy old man. And I was eventually sacked by Trinity Mirror, and I quote now from my dismissal letter, failing to share their aims and values. Well, I'm proud of the fact that I don't share their aims and values.
Yeah.
And I'd been thinking, even before they sacked me, I had been thinking about the possibility of doing something like Cornwall Reports. In fact, I'd even suggested it to them corporately that they should have, as part of their armoury of publications, a paywalled site.
Yeah.
They weren't interested. I knew that I was going to be leaving, because at first I was suspended, and there's a whole kind of dismissal process you go through, and I used that period to set up crowdfunding.
Okay, yeah.
Now I'd never done crowdfunding before. I'd heard that people could get other people, even some that they'd never met before, just to give them money, and I thought, wow, how does that work? So I researched it and wrote a business plan and made some videos. So having worked in television for 30 years was quite useful, having that skill set to make some hard-hitting videos about why it was necessary for the democratic fabric of Cornwall to have an alternative media voice. And the crowdfunding money came in, and I raised £3,000 in 6 weeks.
Oh, right, wow.
And that is how Cornwall Reports came to be launched. That provided the money that, for the most part, got me through my first year, while that, it's still a small number of subscriptions, but came in.
Yeah.
And, all kinds of adjustments had to be made through the year, mainly to do with cutting expenditure.
Yeah.
That's why I'm as thin as I am.
Living off the beans and toast.
And But it's going to be okay. And I wonder. I've had people approaching me from all over the country, indeed from all over the world, asking, would this work here? And the answer is it might, in some places, but in other places it wouldn't. I think one of the reasons why Cornwall Reports is working as a paywalled local news site is because it's Cornwall. There is something unique about the cultural identity of Cornwall, a cohesiveness and a sense of identity that lends itself. And you've got that volume, as I say, 500 population, more than 500,000.
Yeah.
Now, if you were going to try and do this in a city like Exeter, I'd say it's probably you haven't got the numbers. There is something similar in Bristol, but they're relying on charitable handouts to keep going, and I think they may have had some European money to start with, or a government grant or something like that. So it's kind of grant funded, whereas apart from my crowdfunding money, I've not had any government help. It's all just me, and it's a robust, stands on its own 2 feet business model. It's got to be sustainable, so there's no point relying on government handouts. They do disappear eventually.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's interesting you say that river divide is quite. I think a lot of people, even though most Cornish people talk about it, it is very, very.
It's real. It's tangible.
It's real. Yeah, it's a very real thing.
Definitely.
And I'm doing it myself. I'm tapping into that sort of thing, the identity of Cornwall as well, and it's it's very interesting actually. And how there is that sort of disconnect, but it's still connected, if you know what I mean. It is interesting, and like you said, that there is that number of people now.
Yeah, it's in. We're talking about micro media sites. There are more in Wales than there are anywhere else in the UK, and very small communities have got their own local news websites, but they're not behind a paywall. They're free, or they're supported entirely by very small advertising revenues. Yeah. So it is literally the village butcher who's the only person advertising there. And they're kind of community efforts. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think that is the lifeblood of how you can disseminate local news at a community level. That's where you go to for pictures of your daughter in the school Christingle. And that's absolutely fine. And to some extent, Facebook, through local community Facebook pages, has taken the place of that. But there has always really been a place in local news for serious news. It's never been the thing that really sold the paper on a large scale, but it was always important. And coverage of what goes on at courts, inquests, councils. When I started on the Cambridge Evening News, one of the first things I got sent to was the East Anglian Water Board, because in those days they were public bodies, and their meetings were held and open to the public. Well, there's no way that South West Water would allow me into their board meetings now, but stuff like that is really important. The closest we get to it these days would probably be the Environment Agency, and I don't think they hold their board meetings in public. So you've got to know where the levers of power are and how you prise the lid off those organisations to look inside. And sadly, and again I start to sound very much like a grumpy old man here, the skills that I learnt in the 1970s are lost skills. It's a craft that no longer really exists. A bit like somebody who can do a thatched roof or a blacksmith. Been sacrificed on the altar of high volumes. And although, I never went to university, I became a journalist just with A-levels. A-levels in pure maths, applied maths and physics, actually. Totally the wrong subjects. But the Cambridge Evening News gave me a job anyway, simply because of my pester power in begging them for a job. Now it's an all-graduate profession. You usually go to a journalism school and do a post-grad diploma or something like that. And while you do learn some stuff that may be useful, you don't actually learn what a story is. No. And how to get it, and how to make contacts, and how to gain the trust of people who might get sacked for talking to you. But you do gain their trust, and they do talk to you, and you just learn how to write the story without getting them sacked.
That's fascinating. That's really interesting, because I can just see everybody now almost Googling just everything, just literally go on Google, find that out, and just pull in everything from what the internet is telling them already, rather than going to the source. And finding it out.
Don't get me wrong, I use Google, I use Wikipedia. I mean, there are fantastic resources out there on the internet, but the fact that it's on the internet means that everybody already knows about
That's
it.
right, yeah.
So there's nothing new on the internet.
Yeah, it's almost repackaging something in a different way.
That's right. Indeed. You look at jobs that might get advertised for local news websites now, they're not even called journalists anymore, they're called curators. Because that's basically what it is. It's what can we rip off for free? Whose photographs are there on the internet who's not going to sue us if we use that photo? That's basically what it's come down to. But I've always believed that there is a market for high quality original journalism. I'm proud of the skills I learnt in the 1970s, and if you like, it's my last hurrah, some Don Quixote type tilting at windmills to prove that journalism has value and people should pay for it. They shouldn't expect news to be free, and that's going to be on my tombstone.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I mean, journalism has taken a very bad rap in recent times, I think, because, like you said, mainstream media just sort of, they're either leaning, they're not very objective, I find. They're either like objective to, or very subjective towards whatever they are trying to push, and they are lacking in that objectivity. And it is all literally who can come on and how many people can we get looking at this thing as quickly as we can. Just kind of moving things on a little bit into trying to take it into Cornwall then. What's some of the biggest stories that have come out in recently? I mean, something that I've been following a little bit is the stadium for Cornwall. I'm quite interested in that. It's very
well, that's going to be a really big story in the weeks ahead. Because it's only going to happen if Cornwall Council hands over £6 million of your money before the 1st of May. Okay, so
it's not long away.
No. So the council's going to have a meeting in April to decide whether to do that or not. They've got a previous policy that says that they should not hand over public money to support it. They've got to get round that. They've got to change that policy, and they've only got about 6 weeks to do it. So
mad. I mean, for me, I think this is where it's probably become quite an interesting story for the public, and what I've seen online. I think the majority of the public actually want this to happen. I think.
But there are huge questions. I mean, is 3 Milestone at Truro the right place? Why should the public put money in to support something which is basically a private enterprise? It's going to be owned by the Cornish Pirates Rugby Club, so it's not going to be owned by the taxpayer who pays to build it. Putting £6 million in is the easy bit. How do you get any money back out? What's the revenue model? It's a 6,000-seater stadium. Well, the Pirates get about 1,500 attendance. Truro City Football Club, on a good day, get 500 maybe, mostly wives and girlfriends. So you're struggling to get 6,000 just from the sports use. Truro and Penwith College want to use it for catering courses, okay, but they're part of the building operation anyway, so there's no real revenue coming from that. Building it, if it ever does get built, is going to be the easy part. Keeping it going without further public subsidy every year, I think, is almost impossible. And you've got to ask why there. Well, the answer now is because it's an integral part of a massive housing project, 1,000 houses. Arguably, if it was just going to be for sports, a better place would be Camborne, where the council already owns the land and it's next to a railway, and there's plenty of parking, and so there are lots of arguments for not doing it there as well. It's going to be a fascinating debate in the council chamber, because pretty much every political party is split on it. So I wouldn't like to say which way it's going to go. The sports fans are a powerful lobby. They're shouting very loud. Don't blame them for doing that. But the taxpayers' lobby is also quite a powerful lobby. And they're asking what's in it for them. And until we see a business plan that says this is how and when you're going to get your £6 million investment back, why would you do it?
That's right. I mean, at the end of the day, it's interesting that you say that. that like the Pirates get 1,500 to a game or what have you. Like, if people are so adamant on having this stadium, then they need to show up every week. Do you know what I mean? Like people need to start going, and
it's
maybe the fact
chicken and egg, isn't it?
That's it. I mean, maybe moving it further up into the county might make it more appealing rather than being all the way down in Penzance. Brings them a bit more into the centre, maybe a bit easier to get everyone to get to, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're here in a pub in Parr. The local MP for this area thinks that it should be based in this area at St.Austell.
Well, yeah.
He would, wouldn't he? You know, I mean, ask all of the politicians and they'll say, what's in it for me? Where's the pork? So it's...
That's right. So... What other? Is there been any other sort of big stories about
well, over the years? I'm pretty
much
much interested in anything that you would describe as news. You know, I'm still passionate about local news. Over the years, I have had some stories that. I've got an attic full of awards. He said, saying, you know, sounds very big-headed, but I've got more awards than I've got space for in the house, and. One that a television documentary that I'm particularly proud of concerned the old nerve gas factory in Cornwall at Nanskewk, now RAF Portreath, which is a story that had never really been properly told before, and I was able to use my political contacts to gain access to the Ministry of Defence and got access to loads of documents and photographs that were top secret until we made a documentary about them. That showed the whole history of it and showed really how the civil servants got this thing built without even asking the politicians.
Right.
So it's a really it goes back to just after the First World War, when in the First World War both sides used mustard gas and chlorine, for example, and there was a factory in Manchester where we used to make our own quantities of that, and that was then brought down to Cornwall at the end of the First World War. During the build-up to the Second World War, they started production of even more dangerous gases and antidotes to the gases as well. And for a while it was a very significant employer in Cornwall, and all the people who worked there were sworn to complete secrecy. And most people didn't even know it existed until the people who worked there started dying in unusual numbers, possibly because of accidental exposure to these deadly nerve gases. And the Ministry of Defence was so worried that it was as a result of accidental exposure that they did a secret survey. It's basically while these guys are dying. This was a study done to find out how long they lived for once they'd retired and things like that. And because they were they were exposed to dangerous chemicals. They didn't necessarily die straight away. So it was a judgment as to what extent was the exposure responsible for their premature death later. So they were dying in their 50s rather than in their 70s or 80s. Just bad luck. Unusual to see such a cluster there. And the Ministry of Defence's own study, had it been published at the time, would have been a total scandal, because it said, we think we probably are responsible for killing our own workers there. So that was a really, really big story at the time. It was a TV documentary. I'm still quite proud that I'm the reporter that got that story. And it led to debates in Parliament, and the government had to promise to clean up the site because a lot of the dangerous chemicals were just dumped and polluted the area. So
you said down by Nanskewk?
Yeah, Nanskewk, RAF Portreath, it's known as now, yeah. So it's that kind of stuff that, in those days, I was the current affairs editor at ITV West Country. I was the boss of my department, and so I could decide what stories I wanted to investigate. And I had £2 million a year to go and do it. So it was great.
That's like a field day.
Absolutely. Well, I had about 20 people working for me, and so it was. That's what floats my boat, and I really enjoyed having that creative freedom, even though I wore a suit and sat behind a desk, to direct operations and use the experience I had to encourage younger journalists that there was more to it than just celebrity tittle-tattle.
That's great. So how have you? So from there then, obviously. So how many years ago were you doing that?
Oh, that one was 2001, 2002, something like that. So about 16, 17 years ago, that particular documentary.
And then you said you.
And I carried on with ITV West Country until they closed down their current affairs department in 2007.
Right, wow. So, and then you've been at Cornish Guardian. You said you was at Cornish Guardian for 10 years.
I was at Radio Cornwall for a couple of years, Spotlight Television for a couple of years, other freelance gigs. Because of my background in politics, really, the political parties, all of them, have been prepared to pay me from time to time for offering them help and advice.
Right, yeah.
So you manage to trade on what you build up, really. But I've always wanted to be able to publish my own product with complete control and autonomy. And I'll be the first to admit that it doesn't. Cornwall Reports, while I would strongly recommend everybody to read it, there will be some people who read it and absolutely don't agree with it. I make no secret of the fact that I would describe myself as left-wing in political terms. But I'm not particularly partisan in the way that Cornwall Reports applies my left-wing politics to any particular political party. So, go back 20 years, the Liberal Democrats were more, under Charles Kennedy's leadership, were more left-wing than the Labour Party was under Tony Blair. Since then, the Liberal Democrats moved to the right and went into coalition with the Conservatives, and the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn's moved to the left. So things move around. I like to think I've been fairly consistent, I'm the same old unreconstructed 1970s lefty that I was, and I expect my readers know that, and so I can read the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Mail, and I don't get too angry because it's what I expect, and I interpret it through that filter, and I'm still interested to see how they're covering what's going on with Brexit or within the Conservative Party, knowing that they're family members. Really, it's like listening to an internal family squabble. And Cornwall Reports will make some readers angry because they'll say that this is just left-wing claptrap. I don't think it is. It's all facts. It's a selection of facts, though, that you won't find anywhere else. And for that reason, if you really want to know what's going on, frankly, you have to read Cornwall Reports.
Fair enough. So what have you found is the best, or what was the biggest differences you found from working for an organisation, or another organisation, and for yourself? Have you found it more challenging in certain ways, but freeing in other ways, perhaps?
As long as you don't mind the fact that if you work for yourself, you've got no money, no holidays, and you can't go sick. It's great. If those things matter to you, don't be self-employed.
That's true.
Because if you like the idea of having a pension that your employer's going to contribute to, get a proper job. Don't be self-employed. There are the big downsides. It's definitely not for everybody. But even when I had a well-paid staff job with a pension and holidays and guaranteed sick pay and all the rest of it, I think I was probably still a bit maverick. But that helped. That wasn't really a problem. It helped the product. I'll call it a product, right? The TV documentary or just the news story stood out. It was distinct. It wasn't just another 30-minute local documentary because of that rather maverick approach. I have to say, it sounds like sour grapes, but mainstream media today, it bores me. There's nothing in it that I find at all interesting.
No. I think a lot of people are finding that as well, and I think that's why a lot of people are moving on to finding these other avenues to find their information, like podcasts and different avenues through social media and so on. There's hundreds. You can find out your information from almost anywhere now, and it is. I think everything is becoming almost more shared in the big conglomerates and the big parties. Unless it's Google and Facebook, for example, but everyone is picking where they want to find their information. And I think and we're just at the beginning of that.
Well, as we said right at the very beginning, everybody can be a broadcaster or a publisher. The question is, if you want to do it professionally, you've got to really stand out. And you won't stand out if you're just repackaging stuff that you find on Google or read on Wikipedia.
That's right.
Because it's already there.
Yeah.
Everybody knows how to use Google. You have got to stand out, and that means doing original research and come up with an original idea. Well, Cornwall Reports was an original idea because it was basically saying, what I'm doing is valuable, pay me for it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I struggle with doing this now, my podcast and that. Whilst I'm also doing it while I'm working full time to get my feet off the ground, if you like. And I've never been much of a researcher myself. I've never like, I need to research it. I suppose secretly I have in the things that I'm interested in. Like I research business in a sense. I like the stories of it and everything. But I've been starting to find that out myself in this some of the things that I'm putting out online. Like I was on Instagram and I was putting I was trying to think. I need to find some good content to put out on my Instagram because Instagram doesn't lend itself to podcasts.
No.
So I was like, I get to travel Cornwall quite a lot, and the amount of photographers out there that are taking pictures of Cornwall, and you need something different. So I was like, why don't I try and find these little nooks and crannies in Cornwall that are that people aren't photographing every day.
Yeah.
You know, there's every day is a picture of Kynance Cove. There's every day is a picture of Watergate Bay or Perranporth, and like if I can try and find some nooks and crannies in the desert, but like you said, I'm trying to find also a bit of interesting information or history about that place as well.
Yes, that's right.
And I do feel like I've been the 2 or 3 that I've done. I have repackaged stuff I found off Wikipedia and that, whereas I would like to be able to invest a bit more time into it, but it is difficult when you're a one-man band and you're trying to do almost a bit of everything and get something up and going.
Yeah. No, that's right. I mean, what you're doing, I think, could be really, really interesting. And I mean, somebody once suggested to me that they thought a really good radio program, so maybe this is more for podcasting these days than a radio program, would be to go to a different Cornish village, shall we say, every week and find 4 or 5 elderly people, shall we say over 80, plenty of those in Cornwall, get them to come to a pub like this, sit them down, get them all a pint, it's with the last of the summer wine, and just get them to talk about their memories.
Do you know what? I was literally thinking of something not exactly the same, but something very, very similar just the other day.
Because the world has changed so much during their lives, they will have memories of the Second World War, for example, and what it was like before and after. And if you get that recorded, frankly, you struck gold, because they're not going to be around forever. And if you've got them recorded, those memories, you've got a history story that is going to live forever. You could be doing that podcast, you could record it tomorrow, but that will still have traction in 20, 50 years' time.
Yeah, that's true.
There you go. Have that one for free.
I will, thank you. Brilliant. I mean, is this something that you, with Cornwall Reports, is it something that you solely want to do now just for yourself going forward, or is it something that would you like to build a team again?
Yes, I would. I'd like someone to give me £2 million a year so that I can go around the world and have and set my own deadlines, so that instead of knowing that I've got to do 3 or 4 stories a day and do a video every day, which is what I do at the moment, I could say, we'll spend 6 months on this one, and these are the countries we're going to. That's nice. That is a nice life to have.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I can't see that happening. I mean, it would be great, but So Cornwall Reports either needs to accelerate in terms of how quickly I can build my subscriber base, and I think I'll have 1,000 readers after 3 years.
Yeah.
That's okay, and probably carry on after that. Will I be carrying on? Well, it's not really a job that involves a lot of outdoor work or heavy lifting particularly, so as long as I remain fit and healthy, I should be able to carry on doing it till I'm, another 20, 30 years maybe, who knows, until I lose all of my marbles. But whether it could ever grow to the point where... I mean, I'd like to think that it could, because the technology means that almost everybody now has got a smartphone. Almost everybody that is interested in news has the potential to... And there was a time when local newspapers were read by everybody in Cornwall. So you would have to find a model that reached those people, and either the advertising was sufficiently discreet and appropriate so as to not crash their device when they wanted to use it, or that it was sufficiently high quality and relevant to them that they were prepared to pay. Now, maybe there is a market for Cornwall Reports that does do primary school Christingles and village fetes and so on, and people will pay 9p a day for that kind of product. I suspect, though, that that's a harder sell, because the kind of people that come to Cornwall Reports, I suspect, are what the advertising markets call ABs. You know, they're the people with money. That they can afford to buy a quality newspaper. So I wouldn't say exclusively, but it probably tends to be that market.
Right.
It's not people who buy the Sun or the Daily Star who come to Cornwall Reports.
Yeah,
you know.
I'm with you.
So it's a bit snobbish, you might say, posh news. So you would need to find a business model that broadens your demographic for a much larger market, and made it more like a traditional local newspaper of, shall we say, the 1970s, where you had a full range of material and provided and included the things that I'm not able to provide at the moment. I would love to have more soft news. I would love to have more straightforward community news, and I do have community news pages that people could advertise on if they wanted to. So for example, I've got a Camelford page. If there's an advertiser in Camelford that wants his butcher's shop to go there, that's fine, but it's not going to be a pop-up advert, it's a local advert, and that's appropriate for Cornwall Reports. I wouldn't have a problem with that, but not on my main hard news pages. So but the technology allows you to navigate almost pretty much to anywhere you like. It's easier. It's actually, once you get the hang of it, it's easier to read than an old-fashioned local newspaper that you used to have to spread out on the dining room floor before you could throw away the motor ads and the estate agents ads and all the other bits and pieces that you didn't really want, and then you just flick your way through to the story that you knew was in it anyway, and perhaps you'd only buy it for that one story.
Yeah, no, that's I can imagine that. I mean, I think for me, when as for newspapers, newspapers haven't necessarily been a big part of my life. I mean, I'm 30 at the end of this year, and so obviously I know about newspapers, but by the time I was sort of old enough to be really interested in what news was happening, it was like the internet was already here, you know, and it was already sort of on its way to what it's becoming now. And I mean, the reason why I ask you about the building a new team, and that is, I mean, the opportunities for, say, young journalists up and coming that may almost share your passion and your ideas behind how your career has gone, and they kind of feel the same way. I mean, if they've got their own blog or their own thing coming on, is there a way that they could put their story on your platform to build their
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
I think that it's possible to use Cornwall Reports maybe as a portal or a gateway to other appropriate platforms.
Yes.
Now, I mean, for example,
that's the key word, appropriate, by the way.
Because every day I do a review of the local media. I sit down in front of a TV camera and for about 2 minutes I just talk about, this is what the local websites are saying today. So I talk about what's on Cornwall Live, and I talk about what's on the Falmouth Packets website, or the Cornish and Devon Post, or the Cornish Times, Radio Cornwall, Pirate FM, and so on and so forth. And that helps promote them, as well as just very quickly skating over, really, the kinds of stories that I'm not interested in covering myself, but I recognise some readers would be interested in knowing about.
Yeah.
So I mean, yesterday, for example, nearly all of the media were just banging on about the fact we'd had a bit of snow.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not actually interested in spending hours and hours and hours talking about snow, but other media are. That's fine, and I think it's interesting that they are. That's actually part of our culture, is to reflect the fact that a huge part of our media is obsessed with the weather.
Yeah.
I actually think weather is weather. It's not news. There's nothing we can do about it.
No, it just happens.
It happens. But actually, Facebook posts. Who's ranting about what? If it's relevant to my kind of readers, quite how I would go about curating that. But it is an interesting idea, and if it simply helps to, I mean, because it could be mutually beneficial. It could help Cornwall Reports, and it could also help struggling young blog writers get exposure. Because although I've only got 300 readers, actually I get several thousand uniques on my homepage in a week, because the homepage is free.
Okay, I'm with you.
So
that's an interesting thing. You missed out at the beginning.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, well, I want people to pay me,
of course.
but they can come to the homepage for free, and if they like what they see and they want to get into the website.
Yeah.
But there's usually about 30 stories just on the front page.
Wow.
So if you can imagine it like, go to a newsagent and you're just looking at what the front pages are saying, and you don't have to pay.
Yeah.
Well, that's the same idea.
Yeah,
so you can come to my front page, see what I'm banging on about, and if you want the full story, cough up.
Yeah.
But my front page gets, because it's free, about 9,000 I think I got last week, uniques a week from all over the world, which makes me think, okay, there's a level of at least passing interest.
Yeah, definitely.
And in fact, over my first year, it was about 100,000 uniques. So that's 100,000 different people have grazed on Cornwall Reports without actually getting their wallet out and flashing the plastic and doing the credit card payment that they would need to get full access. And I think that it's from that constituency that my subscriber base is starting to build. The word is spreading, and the more people that know about Cornwall Reports, obviously, the better. But I do like that idea, because if I've got other blogs linking to me through pingbacks and so on, then it's not going to do me any harm.
No, that's amazing. Those numbers are amazing. I mean, in this day and age, it is difficult to transfer those passing eyes into paid consumers, if you like, which is why I've tried to. I'm going down the advertising route with the podcast, but like you, I'm trying to find a balance between making sure that it's not interfering with the content that I'm providing.
Cornwall Live is the classic example of I know so many people that just have given up trying to navigate that site because of the ads the data acquisition and the surveys that fly out of the screen at you.
Yeah, no, that is something I'm totally trying to avoid.
Infect your computer with malware the whole time,
It's like, when you're going to come, like almost like sending you more information to like force you to click on it again or something. I don't know. Yeah. But that is something definitely that I'm conscious of. Like, for example, this conversation now, when I put it out, even though I haven't got any advertisers as such yet, there'll never be a break through the conversation. I have adverts at the beginning, which actually on a podcast you can fast forward.
This is going to be a long interview for somebody to listen to, isn't it?
Well, we're 55 minutes, so we're actually So we're getting to the point where. But what's great, I mean, I love it. I'll listen to a conversation that's 3 hours long in my van, and that's just what I love, because I love getting into the detail of it, but I don't like reading it myself. I don't find reading. I like reading when I can be bothered to sit there and read it, but I can sit there and listen.
Well, I mean, I would say you're going for the same market as me, which is people that want stuff in depth. Because if this is going to be an hour-long interview, very few people would actually listen to an hour-long interview.
Right.
I think the attention span of a soundbite in local radio is about 10 to 15 seconds.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, that's it. And that's exactly right. That's exactly the difference of where I'm trying to get this. And instead of you trying to find out the information, so I do want to have... I've actually had local politicians on the show before, and so for them, that is... I think this would be a good avenue for them, because I can take the questions from the public and then ask them directly, and then they can the people in the public can hear it directly from their voice. It's not being... The only thing is being passed through is the microphone that I've set up and the internet.
Yeah.
Like it's coming straight from the horse's mouth, and I think this is what is powerful about what I'm doing. But I think eventually, to make it a real business, in the sense where I can employ other people and things like that I might have to set up some sort of subscriber type
I
of
have
thing.
to say, I tell you what, I would pay to listen to the local history stories of elderly people reminiscing about how their village has changed. I mean, in this area, you go to some of the China clay villages that actually no longer exist because their villages were bulldozed in order to make way for tip expansion, for example. So they had to move.
Yeah.
So
can you give me some examples?
There's. I'm trying to remember the name. Was it Bewolder? I'm trying to remember.
Lauder?
There's a village. I think it was in the 1960s. Everybody had to be evacuated because ECLP, as it was in those days, wanted to expand the tip. So they all had to move. And I think you can just about see the ruins of the primary school there. Find people who were alive there at that time and get them to talk about the day they all had to move out because the tip was coming. I find that kind of local history fascinating. I don't think anybody is left alive who worked at the nerve gas factory at Nanskuk. But I'll give you another one. Up near Bude, there's a GCHQ outpost there at Morwenstow. You might be familiar with it. It's not as secret as it used to be, but it is still a secret installation. It's more secret than GCHQ because it's built by the Americans, and it's really an NSA base rather than a GCHQ base. But there are people who live in that area and it was built in the 1960s. There are people around then who can remember when it was built and all the Americans who came over. And there are undersea cables under Widmouth Bay, for example, linking it to Virginia in the USA. And that kind of, it's not obvious to the tourists, that's for sure. That kind of secret Cornwall.
Yeah. I mean, there's
a pipeline that links Falmouth and St Morgan, which is an emergency oil pipeline that was there to help fuel bombers during the Second World War, and it's still part of an emergency pipeline network.
Wow, I didn't know that one.
There's all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean,
you get a fascinating series of podcasts out of Secret Cornwall.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Secret Cornwall, there was I did.
Oh, actually, I think a friend of mine's done a book on it recently. Although hasn't got as many secrets as I would have expected.
Not now. we're slowly sort of trying to prise them out of the woodwork. But no, that's what I mean. There's so many fascinating stories about Cornwall. I mean, you go back to almost like medieval times, and there's so much there from old things that are buried now.
Just exactly. We're just outside Truro
as well.
In fact, where they're planning to build the stadium,
Yeah.
there's a group of archaeologists at this moment excavating what was known as a witch's pit.
A witch's pit, right. I've got an idea.
Yeah, well, it's where dead witches ended up.
Yeah, flipping hell.
And it's because there was what was thought of at the time, and it's not that long ago. I think we're looking at the 18th century, so maybe 250 years ago.
Yeah.
Cornwall was one of the last places, I believe, that still executed witches.
Yeah, we're always a bit behind the times down here. Maybe not in super fast broadband though, because.
I think even Scotland had stopped executing witches, but
wow.
Anyway,
Yeah.
This is a project that's been going for some years. Not very many people know about it. I think they've got a website, and it's largely amateur archaeologists who volunteer, but it's under professional direction. And I think some of that is on its way to Truro Museum. But look, fascinating. When I found out about that, I thought, God, I'd love to go and see some of the artefacts that they've dug up there.
Yeah, we do live in a fascinating part of the world, I think, and I'm looking forward to finding out more about it myself. Okay, so as we are at about an hour now, I normally try and keep them to about roughly an hour.
I would recommend that you don't go beyond an hour.
No, that's it. So before we sort of say goodbye, but have you got anything else that you think we might have missed that you'd like to bring up?
I'd just like to wish you the very best of luck with this venture, because I do think technology gives us all the opportunity to become broadcasters, podcasters, publishers, and we all should. And I think that this technology is fantastically important. It almost doesn't matter if you're not making any money out of it. It's all right for me to say that because I am, but I think if I have got a last word to say, I'll bring in my politics experience on this. The result of the last general election surprised a lot of people, and one of the unseen forces in play during the last general election campaign was the power of social media. Up until the last general election, social media had been used, but not really very much, but it's really exploded in the last 5 to 10 years. And the media had been so influential in determining the outcome of elections in this country, and its vice-like grip on our democratic structures is now being loosened in a way that we've never seen in history, really. I mean, you can go back to the 18th century and the levellers and the chartists and people, the pamphleteers, who used to be thrown in prison and deported to Australia for daring to publish seditionary thoughts, challenging the power of the bosses. And now we all do it all the time. Even the President of the United States turns first to Twitter. So I would encourage everybody to get into this technology. You're never too old. I've got friends younger than me who have retired. So you're never too old to get into this technology. Use it. It is the power which is going to change the world.
Brilliant. I think that's an amazing way to end the show. And thank you so much, Graham, for being on the show. And if you're really interested in local news and great journalism, then go to Cornwall Reports.
.co.uk.
There we go. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Cheers and gone. So, there we have it. That's the discussion with Graham over. I hope you really enjoyed it and hope you got a lot of good, valuable information in there. So, like I said, check him out. He's on, you can search Cornwall Reports on, Twitter and Facebook. And you can also go to cornwallreports.co.uk. Like we said during the conversation, it's £30 per year, which I think is amazing value. It's 9p a day for some of the best journalism in Cornwall. Also, just a quick recap, the introductory music was by Richard Flant and the song was Raise Your Head, and you can find him on Twitter and you can find the songs on SoundCloud and YouTube. So at the beginning, I did mention that I would like to discuss sort of advertising on the platform. If you've been watching on YouTube and you might have seen the one advert that I've got on the podcast so far of Kernow car valeting. And as you can see, it's silent through the YouTube video. So the idea is that there's 30 slots available on each episode, each a minute long, which will be tied in with the video part of what we do, and then the adverts will be played over the top. So they're silent, but they're quite good for passive listening. And if you just catch it, then brilliant. They're a pound per episode. I don't know if you can ask for any better value out there. If you can find any cheaper advertising in Cornwall to local people, then please let me know, because I'd love to check them out and probably advertise myself on them. So yeah, that's one way we're going to do it. Also, we have audio adverts, so they're a minute long each. I'm going to have 3 at the beginning of each episode, so that as a listener, I don't want to intrude on the discussion. I don't want it to break up the discussion and get in the way. So they are £2 each, and like I said, they're a minute long at the beginning, so you know as a listener that the beginning of every episode it's going to be a maximum of 3 minutes. So if you listen to it all the time and you get used to listening to the adverts that are being played, then you can always skip forward 3 minutes, and then you know that the introduction is going to start, and we'll get into the podcast more. So those are the advertising products. If you're a business, if you are in the community somewhere doing something within the community, anything, MPs, people working for local authorities, anything like that, any charity events you got coming up. If you're a historian, I'd love to speak with some historians, because I'd love to find out more about Cornwall and how we got to where we are now, and all the culture in that. So, and also if you're a band and want to talk to me and get your message out there, play a couple of songs and talk about those songs, then please come on the podcast. It's totally free to be a guest, so I think you should make use of that sort of what I'm offering you. So it would be great to listen to you. I'm interested in all different types of topics related to Cornwall, so yeah, that'd be amazing. If you do so happen to be a guest on the podcast and you feel like, oh god, it's really long, I can't share it with people to get my story across because they're not going to sit there for an hour, fine. We also run a service where you can pay for me to edit that podcast down, that discussion down, and make it into sort of 3, 4, 5 minutes, where we can then, you have a shorter version of it, you get the key points, the main message of your story, and you can share that with whoever you want, and that's £99. So yeah, if you like what we're doing, then please support us, and yeah, please subscribe, review, get hold of us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn as well, so come and find us on all of those platforms. If you're an Android user, don't forget you can download us on Stitcher. Also, we're on Spotify. It's difficult to find. I keep trying to figure out why it's so difficult, but we are on there somewhere. So if you use Spotify, you might be able to find us on there. As for now, I will catch up with you another time, and I look forward to any sort of emails or anything. Emails, that's a good one. kernowcast@gmail.com, cast with a K. There we go. We're broadcasting Cornwall right here from my living room, the dining room, sort of. Look out for more stuff from the Kernow cast. Cheers, my dears.